Hello everybody, welcome to another review. So I'm going to be reviewing a brand new album by the UK metalcore act Bury Tomorrow with Will You Haunt Me With That Same Patience. So Bury Tomorrow started around 2006 with Danny Winterbates as the lead singer. He's the unclean vocalist. This is when the band mainly focused on rougher, growly, just downright harsh sounding music. But over time they've weaned more into adding clean vocals, and they got themselves a permanent clean vocalist, Tom Prendergast, who is the clean vocalist from The Seventh Son onwards. So this is the second album with him featured on it. Now, with Bury Tomorrow, the singles generally have been interesting. I found Villain Arc to be one of the best songs Bury Tomorrow have dropped, an amazing lead single, and it, in my opinion, it interested me more than The Seventh Son in general. The album is good, but Villain Arc just kind of felt like we were going for a more heavy direction. The unclean vocals were more prominent. I generally felt Danny Winterbates' vocals were just getting more gritty and just downright hearing it in songs like Let Go. This guy's definitely a menace. I think the Uncleans are definitely the strong contender of some of the best in a while we've had from the band, but they do sprinkle a lot of the clean vocals in as well, which I think is nice to hear, but it kind of doesn't work when the choruses aren't that strong, unfortunately. Villain Arc doesn't really focus on this proper choruses, it's just mainly different structures of verses mainly in the song. You still get your refrain with the "This is my Villain Arc" line, but it's nice to see how far they dive into it. You get songs like Let Go, which is very catchy, and it's got some, as I said, some of the best unclean vocals. The other singles as well, What If I Burn was another banger, and Waiting, probably my least favourite of the four singles we had, but it's still good. I didn't listen to Forever the Night because there was already a lot of singles and I wanted to kind of have a bit of a surprise going into the record. Now, you get your face belted off with To Dream To Forget, definitely a fun song, and it generally reminds me of The Seventh Son, not in terms of sound, but with how it's kind of a belter of an opening track that just downright puts some of the best material straight forward. And I think the consistency of the first half is quite nice. You get a little bit of drum and bass in Wasteland, which is interesting. Not really exciting now, but Wasteland's a pretty decent sounding song, and it definitely reeled me in. But can't really say the second half does as much of a job of that, unfortunately. If anything, second half is definitely underwhelming, and when I kind of noticed some of the problems with this record, mainly what I mentioned earlier about the clean vocals and chorus writing, it isn't the strongest stuff. Silence Isn't Helping Us is more or less a tamer song. It does build up into kind of a more standard metalcore sound, but it's definitely a softer song that plays with some electronics, and you kind of get this little broken chime. I can't really identify the instrument there, but it definitely reminds me of the sound of skeletons in Minecraft walking around. You can kind of hear that clitter clatter, clanking sound of their bones. I kind of get that impression with it, but it doesn't really pull me in, unfortunately. Found No Throne also is another issue, because this is a good song in its own right, but it should have been the final track. It really feels weird just to kind of have this song that's very slow, ominous. It does have a little bit of a build-up, but not really anything heavy at all in the song. A very clean, safer song for radio, and I kind of feel, why is this the outro? Why isn't this the outro and Paradox is? Paradox to me just kind of feels like a standard song on the record. I feel like it just doesn't make sense to have Found No Throne there. But yeah, it's whatever. Yōkai was probably the last non-album single here that I actually really enjoyed. I like the whole presence of it. It's generally one of the best engaged and just downright face melting bangers from this record, and it gives me kind of that the feeling I had with The Seventh Son, in a way that there is generally some weaker tracks that bring it down, but then as you kind of go forward and forward, there is some nice gems at the end. And as I mentioned, I did like Let It Go, but Paradox, yeah, this one's just a bit underwhelming. I kind of feel like they should have just kind of swapped with Found No Throne, although you kind of get a line of just some weak songs back to back. It's better to have an outro song that feels more like an outro song, rather than just have a random song that just kind of could have been anywhere else on the record, to be honest. It could have been in the first track, and I think it made more sense, but yeah, just my 2 cents there. Overall though, I think it's a nice metalcore album. I think it's got less consistency than The Seventh Son, I kind of will agree with, but the highs are a lot higher. And frankly, I kind of prefer to see more of this direction. At least I feel like if they could utilize Tom to have some better moments with him, it would make it a lot more enjoyable. But I think, to me, The Seventh Son had a bunch of songs that stood out to me more on first listen, but I kind of prefer the quality of the bangers on this one, so probably say it's the same tier of enjoyment. I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's certainly not a terrible album, and it's still got the quality of Bury Tomorrow, but certainly not one of their best albums either. It's just pretty much the same position as Seventh Son. I kind of hope that they can push up, because I definitely had a lot more hope for this record to be even better than what I think, but still good nonetheless. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.